They abided by the rules that we set out, and I don't think that people who are here illegally should be given a jump in the line and put up ahead of people who have tried to comply with the rules that we have set out. And that applies to anybody who's here illegally. Like I said, I don't care what their race or ethnicity is.
So you would bring Lafayette to New York?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question, directly for just to shift to what we're talking about.
I can't hear you.
Could
you stand up?
Is your mic superior?
I told Andrew a couple years ago he'd make a great litigator. He's not trying to prove me wrong.
We talk a lot about the legislation in Arizona, and I think it's important also to talk a little bit about the social aspect of the law. Obviously, it's passed in that state. What do we do about that? How do we change sort of the momentum that this legislation has now back towards directly to the real issue, which is sort of the war on illegal immigrants causing problems in the state? I don't know if that was clear.
I'm glad you asked that question. Although I said that wasn't what I was going to talk about today, but I think data is really on the side of reason here. I think that because I've changed my mind on immigration in recent years, and it was really in response to data. And so I have this, hope that other people could go through the same process. As you know, I'm a recent teacher of immigration law. I taught labor and employment law in this law school for over 30 years. And I used to think about immigration issues like labor and employment people did. I wasn't really expert in the field. In '86, when they talked about employer sanctions and put them in, I used to think that it was not a good idea for the United States to have a lot of migration, documented or undocumented, of low-skilled migrants from Latin America. I thought they would inevitably depress wages, take jobs from U.S. workers, and the people who would pay the most would be members of minority groups in the United States, other urban workers, people here on green cards, wouldn't be on green cards. So, I always thought people should be treated humanely and with constitutional rights. I just didn't think it was a good idea to have a lot of migration of low-skilled people from Latin America. And then, for better or worse, this country ran that experiment in the Clinton years, which were years, the 90s were years of enormous job growth, enormous expansion of the labor force. We ended welfare as we knew it. Lots of welfare recipients entered the workforce under compulsion. Rate of women's labor force participation increased. Tremendous migration legal, tremendous illegal migration, and it wasn't any kind of disaster. We somehow managed to find jobs for these people. And it was clear to me that my simple picture of the world, which is mostly a simple picture of the world, was just wrong, and that the economics of migration were very much more complicated than we think. Nobody is an undocumented migrant because that's their choice. Everybody who comes in without documentation would certainly prefer to come in legally. But our federal categories for issuing visas to people are completely out of whack with the needs of the modern economy. The economy, for complex reasons, has generated an enormous number of fairly low-paid service occupations, childcare being an absolutely classic one. Now, how else do working people get childcare? You either can get a visa for grandma, or you get some kind of other visa for grandma which she overstays, or an enormous amount of childcare is provided by migrants, some of them documented, some not. Everybody knows this, but it was only this year in the American Economic Review that Hawk and Furtado went county by county on percentage of migrants in the workforce. Now they can't check for legal status. Some are legal, some are illegal. Counties with a lot of migrants have more child care, more women's labor force participation. Why does it surprise anybody? Who do you think was taking care of the children? So, and yet some of that migration is legal. But typically, if it's a family member sponsoring, because there's no legal means for a migrant to come into the country and do work at a resort, do agriculture, cut crops. Right? We have a temporary worker program that's completely inadequate. Cutting crops in Arizona and California, this is something that no American of any worker has done for generations. It's always done by migrants. So that's why, to my mind, the issue is what people call comprehensive immigration reform, where you amnesty those who are deserving, you try to put your visa categories more in needs with the economy, but it's a long process to have that debate. But in the long run of American history, we're a very welcoming country to immigrants who tend to assimilate rapidly and become American. in the long run, the combination of business that wants cheap labor, and immigrant communities that want to reunify their family, can keep us a pretty open country. There are always, at all times in American history, restrictionists who are worried that their group is losing the country. And today's immigrants are not like the old immigrants, and they're a big cultural threat. And usually, this is my only hope here, usually those people lose. But sometimes, in times of depression or anxiety about foreign affairs, the restrictionists are able to get the upper hand. And we seem to be living through a time like that now, although we haven't really seen any new restrictions in the immigration laws. But I remain hopeful that over the long course of American history, economic reality will lead us to be what we usually have been, welcoming toward immigrants and willing to examine our immigration and visa policies to see if they're what the economy needs. Thank you.
So, okay, thank you for the debate. My name is Judicial. I guess I'll start off by saying I am a 1L, so the forces right now are disbanded, and we're looking at precedent and kind of how things like these can lead up to a future issue. So one of my questions is, for example, in Virginia they had something like the basement boys, where like four kids with Somalian background were found to be possibly supporting things in Somalia. So it is a foreign affairs issue. So what happens now if this law passes, if Virginia as a state wants to enact a law stopping Muslims that look Somalian or Muslims that possibly can be working in foreign terror issues, I mean, what are the future implications on new laws that might look at racial discrimination as a definite way to be stopping terrorism in the U.S.? You know, there's no, just like there isn't any illegal immigrant look, there's no Muslim look, and I don't know what kind of future this holds for, you know, people that are of my background. So.
Well, I guess I don't really understand the question because, you know, the Federal Civil Rights Act and various constitutional provisions prevent racial and ethnic discrimination. So no state's going to be able to pass a law that allows racial or ethnic discrimination to go on. You know, we fought that battle. We got rid of Jim Crow laws that allowed that. So the idea that because Arizona or other states help enforce federal immigration law, that we're somehow going to be engaging in racial ethnic discrimination is just simply, I think that's a false premise and a false claim, one that's just not the case.
Mr. Spakovsky.
Well, I should say everybody's doing a pretty good job with my name.
I'm David Edward at 3L. I had some sort of a problem with your presentation. I was hoping you could clarify them a little bit so that I can understand a little bit more.
Sure.
The first is at the end of your presentation, you called for a practical view of what Arizona was trying to do here, and I don't understand that call for practical view in light of your response to some of the concerns other people have had about race and about profiling. I believe that they have a practical view of it, and I think that I'd like to understand a little bit how you can be practical about that but not practical about their concerns. And the second, Professor Hyde outlined some dangerous roads that we've walked in the past in terms of Jackie's internment and roads that we've walked down that I think universally agreed to have been bad roads. And I don't understand your reaction to his bringing those up, which I think that you pretty much said is not what we're talking about, and yet at the same time you brought up how perhaps the proper application of our immigration laws could stop 9/11. I don't understand how those two things fit together.
I'll take the last one first. The last part of the question confuses legal immigration with illegal immigration. Okay, the detention of the Japanese during World War II had absolutely nothing to do with enforcement of our federal immigration laws. And there isn't anyone saying that we should turn off the spigot of legal immigration. Legal immigration is what has made this a great country. We're the most welcoming country in the world when it comes to legal immigration. Our laws are very good on that issue. And the fact that people such as I are saying that we need to enforce our federal immigration laws with regard to people who break our laws and come here illegally has absolutely nothing to do with legal immigration. They're two very distinct issues, and the one has nothing to do with the other. With regard to racial profiling, if racial profiling was a real problem with this case, I can guarantee you that the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, where I used to work, and which is responsible for enforcing our civil rights, all of our civil rights laws, they would have put a provision claiming a violation of those laws because of racial profiling in the lawsuit. Do you really think if that was a viable claim, they would not have put it in the federal lawsuit that they filed? They didn't. And the reason they didn't is because the statute very clearly says that race and ethnicity cannot be used. If it is used, if it is applied in a racially discriminatory manner, then people will be able to sue. It's just like a speeding law, okay? A law that says you can't go more than 70 miles per hour on a highway. You know, if the police only stop people of a certain race when they're speeding, well then obviously the law is being applied in a racially discriminatory manner. People have a cause of action. But the speeding law is not racially discriminatory or it causes racial profiling. And the same is with this statute. This statute specifically says you cannot use race. If it's applied in a racially discriminatory manner, then people will be able to sue and they'll win and they'll get damages from the state. But the law on its face is perfectly constitutional. It's perfectly in accord with not only our civil rights statute, but it's in accord with the guidance on racial profiling issued by the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice.
Question for Mr. Spakovsky. You mentioned earlier, actually, I can't escape from the conclusion that this whole talk about immigrants is basically a smoke and mirrors to cover up the real problem that we have in this country. I do agree with you that immigration, illegal immigration in particular, is a serious problem that costs us money. However, I do, as I said, I can't escape the conclusion that it's coming in a moment. This has been a problem for over 15, 20 years. And only in the times when the economy has actually tanked, when we have so many other problems, this is when the story comes up. And I think the reason why it comes up, as just my personal opinion, is to cover up or to divert the attention from the real problem that we have. And you mentioned the total cost of $113 billion over the course that illegal aliens cause this country. As I said, it's hard for me to think that, you know, the false wars we had that cost us over $1 trillion basically are not much more of a problem than, you know, people who come into this country for whatever else reason. And also, I would like you to discuss the benefits of illegal immigration to this country in terms of big businesses. We all know that big meat packing industry, Cargill, whoever, they actually benefit from this. And they're the ones who prevent, basically, you know, good enforcement of the immigration law. And they're the ones who hire illegal aliens. They're the ones who support them coming in, or actually, by them giving them the job, they actually attract them. So I would like you to respond to that. How does the big business and the interest of the big business and interest of the economy as a whole basically affect this whole notion that illegal aliens are not welcome in this?
Well, it's a very complicated question, which I don't think I can answer all of it. But I will say that, look, I don't agree with the position of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce on this issue. In fact, there's a case before the U.S. Supreme Court right now over another Arizona immigration law, which I'm sure you all haven't even heard of, and that is, was 2 years ago, 2007, Arizona passed a law making it a state crime for an employer in Arizona to knowingly hire an illegal alien. And that law was upheld by the Federal District Court. It was upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's now before the U.S. Supreme Court. And who filed the suit? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Okay? But I'll tell you my answer to that there's two parts to this. First, I was at a civil rights conference about a month ago, sponsored by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And one of the speakers was a gentleman who was Martin Luther King's legal advisor. And let me tell you, he was more conservative than I was about enforcement of federal immigration laws. And the reason he said was that was the lack of enforcement of that was one of the main causes for the extremely high unemployment rate in the African American community. And that is also illustrated by a case that was talked about. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal about 2 years ago of a plant